Hello, I am Gwen, the hostess with the mostess. And as your hostess, I bring you The Doom That Came to Sarnath by H.P. Lovecraft. There is in the land of Nar a vast still lake that is fed by no stream, and out of which no stream flows. 10,000 years ago there stood by its shore the mighty city of Sarnath, but Sarnath stands there no more. It is told that in the immemorial years, when the world was young, before ever the men of Sarnath came to the land of Manar, another city stood beside the lake, the gray stone city of Ib, which was old as the lake itself, and the people with beings not pleasing to behold. Very odd and ugly were these beings, as indeed are most beings of a world yet in Choat 8, and rudely fashioned. It is written on the brick cylinders of Cadaratheron that the beings of Ib were in hue as green as the lake and the mists that rise above it, and they had bulging eyes, pouting flabby lips, and curious ears, and were without voice. It is also written that they descended one night from the moon in a mist, they and the vast still lake, and the angry stone city of Ib. However this may be, it is certain that they worshipped a sea-green stone idol chiseled in the likeness of Bakrug, the ancient great water lizard, before which they danced horribly when the moon was gibbous. And it is written in the papyrus of Elarnek that they were one day discovered fire, and therefore kindled flames on many ceremonial occasions. But not much is written of these beings, because they lived in very ancient times, and man is young and knows little of the very ancient living things. After many eons, men came to the land of Manar, dark, shepherded folk with their fleecy flocks, who built Thrar, Elarnek, and Cadatheron on the winding river Ai. And certain tribes, more hardy than the rest, pushed on the border of the lake and built Sarnath at a spot where precious metals were found in the earth. Not far from the gray city of Ib did the wandering tribes lay the first stones of Sarnath, and at the beings of Ib they marveled greatly. But with their marveling was mixed hate, for they thought it not meet that beings of such aspect should walk around the world of men at dusk, nor did they like the strange sculptures upon the grey monoliths of Ib. For why those sculptures lingered so late in the world, even until the coming men, none can tell, unless it was because the land of Manar, very still and remote from most of the lands both of waking and of dream. As the men of Sarnath beheld more of the beings of Ib, their hate grew, and it was not less because they found the beings weak, soft as jelly to the touch of stones and arrows. So one day the young warriors, the slingers and the spearmen and the bowmen, marched against Ib and slew the inhabitants thereof, pushing the queer bodies into the lake with long spears, because they did not wish to touch them. because they did not like the gray sculptured monoliths of Ib, they cast these into the lake, wondering from the greatness of the labor however the stones were brought from afar, as they must have been, since there is not like them in the land of Nar, or in the lands adjacent. Thus the very ancient city of Ib was nothing spared, save the sea green stone idol chiseled in the likeness of Bokrug, the water lizard. This the young warriors took back with them, as a symbol of conquest over the old gods of beings of Ib, and as a sign of leadership in Manar. But on the night after it was set up in the temple, a terrible thing must have happened, for weird lights were seen over the lake. And in the morning the people found the idol gone, and the high priest Taranish laying dead, as some fear unspeakable. And before he died, Tarnish had scrawled upon the altar of chrysolite with coarse shaky strokes the sign of doom. After Tarnish there were many high priests in the Sarnath, but never was the sea green stone idol found, and many centuries came and went, wherein Sarnath prospered exceedingly, so that only priests and old women remembered the Tarnish had scrawled upon the altar of cryosolite betwixt Sarnath and the city of Ilarnek, across a caravan route, and the precious metals from the earth were exchanged for other metals and rare cloths and jewels and books and tools for artificers, and all things of luxury that are known to the people who dwell among the winding river, aye and beyond. So Sarnath waxed mighty, and learned, and beautiful, and sent forth conquering armies to subdue the neighboring cities, and in time sat there upon a throne in Sarnath the kings of the land of Manar, of many lands adjacent. The wonder of the world, the pride of all mankind, was Sarnath magnificent. Of polished desert quarried marble were its walls, in height 300 cubits, and in breadth 75, so that chariots might pass each other as men drove along the top. For full 500 stadia did they run, being open only to the side toward the lake, where a greenstone sea wall kept back the waves that rose oddly once a year at the festival of the destroying of Ib. In Sarnath were 50 streets, from the lake to the gates of the caravans, and 50 more intersecting them with onyx were they paved, save those whereon the horses and camels and elephants trod, which were paved with granite. And the gates of Sarnath were as many as the landward ends of the streets, each of bronze, and flanked by the figures of lions and elephants carven from some stone no longer known to men. The houses of Sarnath were glazed of brick and chalcedony, each having its walls garden in crystal lacquerette. With strange art were they bullied, for no other city had houses like them. And travelers from Thra and Ilnarnek and Cathaderon marveled at the shining domes wherewithin they were surmounted. But more marvelous still were the palaces and the temples, and the gardens made by Zaknar the olden king. There were many palaces, the last of which were mightier than in any in Thra, Ilarnek, or cathedron. So high were they, that one within might sometimes fancy himself beneath only the sky, yet when lighted with torches and dipped in the oil of Dothar, their wall showed vast paintings of kings and armies, of a splendor at once inspiring and stupefying to the beholder. Many were the pillars of the palaces, all of tinted marble, graven into designs of surpassing beauty. And in most of the palaces the floors were mosaics of beryl and lapis lazuli, and sardonyx and carbuncle, and other choice materials, so disposed that the beholder might fancy himself walking over the beds of the rarest flowers. And there were likewise fountains, the beholder might fancy himself And there were likewise fountains which cast scented waters about in pleasing jets, arranged with cunning art. Outshining all others was the palace of the kings of Nar and of the lands adjacent. On a pair of golden crouching lines rested the throne, many steps above the gleaming floor, and it was wrought of one piece of ivory, though no man lives who knows whence so vast a piece could have come. In the palace there were many galleries and many amphitheaters, where lions and men and elephants battled at the pleasure of the kings. Sometimes the amphitheaters were flooded with water, conveyed from the lake in muddy aqueducts. And then they were enacted stirring sea fights, or combatants betwixt swimmers and deadly marine things. Lofty and amazing were the 17 tower-like temples of Sarnath, fashioned of a bright, multicolored stone not known elsewhere. A full 1,000 cubits stood in the greatest among them, where within the high priest dwelt the magnificent, less scarce than that of the other kings. On the ground were halls as vast and splendid as the palaces, where gathered throngs and worshipped of Zoklar and Tamash and Lobon, the chief gods of Sarnath, whose incense enveloped shrines as the thrones of monarchs. Not like the icons of other gods were those of Zoklar and Tamesh and Lobon, for so close to life were they that one might swear the graceful bearded gods themselves sate on the ivory thrones. And up unending steps of Zikron was the tower chamber, wherein the high priest looked out over the city, and the plains and the lake by day, and the cryptic moon and significant stars, and planets and their reflections in the lake at night. Was done the very secret and ancient rite in destation of Bokrug, the water lizard, and here rested the altar of chrysolite, which bore the doom scroll of Taranish. Wonderful were these gardens made by Zakar, the olden king. In the center of Sarnath they lay, covering a great space, and encircled by a high wall, and they were surmounted by a mighty dome of glass, through which shone the sun and moon and planets when it was clear, and from which were hung fulgent images of the sun and moon and stars and planets when it was not clear. In summer the gardens were cool, with fresh odorous breezes skillfully wafted by fans, and in winter were heated with concealed fires, so that those gardens It was lit always spring. There ran little streams over bright pebbles, dividing meads of green gardens of many hues, and spanned by a multitude of bridges. Many were the waterfalls in their courses, and many were the hued lachlets into which they expanded. Over the streams and lachlets rode white swans, whilst the music of rare birds chimed in with melody of the waters. In ordered terraces rose the green banks, adorned here and there with bowers of vines and sweet blossoms, and seats of benches of marble and porphyry. And there were many small shrines and temples, where one rest or pray to small gods. Each year there was celebrated in Sarnath the feast of the destroying of Ib, at which wine, song, and dancing and merriment of every kind abounded. Great honors were then paid to the shades of those who had annihilated the ancient beings, and the memory of those beings and their elder gods were derided by dancers, lutinous, crowned with roses from the gardens of Zokar. And the kings would look out over the lake and curse the bones of the dead that lay beneath it. At first the high priests liked not these festivals, for they had descended among them queer tales of how the sea-green Econ had vanished, and how Tarn-Ish had died from fear and left a warning. And they say, from their high tower they sometimes saw lights beneath the waters of the lake. But as many years passed without calamity, even the priests laughed and cursed and joined in the orgies of the feasters. Indeed, had they not themselves in their high tower often performed the very ancient and secret rite and destination of Bokrug, the water lizard. Yeah. And 1,000 years of riches and delight passed over Sarnath, wonder of the world. Gorgeous beyond thought was the feast of the 1,000th year of the destroying of Ib. For a decade had it been talked of in the land of Manar. As it drew nigh, there came to Sarnath on horses and camels and elephants from Thra, Elnarak, and Cadatharon, and all the cities of Manar and the lands beyond. Before the marbled walls, on the appointed night, were pitched the pavilions of princes and the tents of travelers. Within his banquet hall reclined Nagasai, the king, drunken with the ancient wine from the vaults of conquered Panoth, and surrounded by feasting nobles and hurrying slaves. They were eaten many strange delicacies at that feast: peacocks from the distant hills of Len Plan, heels of camels from the Benazik desert, nuts and spices from Sadarthrian groves, and pearls from wave-washed Mittal, dissolved in vinegar of Thra, of sauces that were an untold number prepared by the subtlest cooks in all Manar, and sweeted to the palate of every feaster. But most prized of the vineyards were the great fishes from the lake, each of vast size, and served upon golden platters set with rubies and diamonds. Whilst the king and his nobles feasted within the palace, and viewed the crowning dish as it awaited them on golden platters, other feasters feasted elsewhere. In the tower of the great temple, the priests held revels In pavilions without walls the princes of neighboring lands made merry. And it was High Priest Janai Ka who first saw the shadows that had descended from the gibbous moon into the lake, and the damnable green mist that arose from the lake to meet the moon, and to shroud in a sinister haze the towers and domes of fated Sarnath. Thereafter those in the towers and without walls beheld strange lights on the water, and saw the grey Acheron, which was wont to rear high above it near the shore, was almost submerged. And fear grew vaguely yet swiftly that the princes of Ilnarak and of far-off Rockall took down the folded their tents and pavilions and departed, though they scarce knew the reason for their departing. Then close to the hour of midnight, all the bronze gates of Sarnath burst open and emptied forth a frenzied throng that blackened the plain, so that the visiting princes and travelers fled away in flight. For on the faces of this throng was writ madness born of horror unendurable, and on the tongues were words so terrible that no hearer paused for proof. Men whose eyes were wild with fear, and shrieked aloud the sight within the king's banquet hall, where through the windows were seen no longer the forms of Nagus High and his nobles and slaves, but a horde of indescribable voiceless things with bulging eyes, pouting flabby lips and curious ears. Things which danced horribly, bearing in their paws golden platters set with rubies and diamonds, containing uncouth flames. And the princes and travelers as they fled the doomed city of Sarnath, and horses and camels and elephants looked again upon the mist begetting lake, and saw the grey rock Acheron was quite submerged. Through all the land of Minar, the ancient adjacent, spread the tales of those who fled Sarnath, and caravans sought that accursed city and its precious metals no more. It was long ere any travels went thither, and even then only the brave and adventurous young men of yellow hair and blue eyes, who were no kin to the men of Nar. Those men indeed went to the lake to view Sarnath, but they found the vast still lake itself, and the grey rock Acheron which rears high above it near the shore. And they beheld not the wonder of the world and pride of all mankind, where once had risen the walls of 300 cubits and towers yet higher, now stretched only marshy shore, and where only dwelt the 50 million men, now crawled the detestable water lizard. Not even the mines of precious metals remain. Doom had come to Sarnath. But half buried in the rushes and spires, a curious green idol, an exceedingly ancient idol, chiseled in the likeness of Bakrug, the great water lizard. That idol, enshrouded in the temple at Ilnarak, was subsequently worshipped beneath the gibbous moon throughout the land of Minar. So, I hope you all enjoyed that reading. I hope you appreciated all the humans getting killed at the end as much as I did. They got what they deserved. They took the land from the monsters and thought the monsters were not going to come back. They really thought that. Of course, coming back to take their home. Of course they did. Wouldn't you if your home was rudely taken? You'd come back one day. At least if you are a monster.